Today's discussion would be on getting familiar with various legal or regulatory requirements that are to be met by the companies interested in raising capital from the capital market. In other words, we will learn what eligibility conditions need to be fulfilled by companies to get entry into primary market. Right? First of all, let's see what are the different modes of floating new capital issues in the primary market. There are three routes. It may be a repetition of what we have already learned in our previous lessons, but this is important. Okay. So there are three routes, as you can see on the screen. These three routes are public issue by prospects, rights issue, and private placement. As we know by now that public issue is the method of selling securities by a private company to the general public through an open offer. A company that goes public gets the privilege of having its shares listed on the stock exchange for trading, but in lieu of this reward, the issuing company has to be now willing to disclose various sensitive and vital matters to the market. Therefore, a public issue helps a private company to unlock its value in the market. Moreover, after public offer, the company has a large and diverse base of shareholders, providing it huge amounts of capital to pursue tremendous business opportunities of expansion and diversification. We also know that public issues can be done by a company at two different stages. One, when it's not yet listed on a stock exchange. In that case, public issue is called initial public offer or IPO. The second is when a company is already listed and is now looking again at primary market for additional capital funds. This time, public issue is called follow-on public offer or FPO. In a more proper sense, the initial public offer or IPO is the issue of securities of either a fresh or an existing nature or both for sale by an unlisted company for the first time to the public. Therefore, this of course lends an issuing company a first-hand experience of capital issuing when it sells an IPO in the primary market. Similarly, the follow-on public offer or FPO involves issue of securities of either a fresh or an existing nature or both for sale by a listed company on subsequent basis to the public. Therefore, in case of FPO or follow-on public offer, the issuing company should not be treated as a naive relating to different matters of public offer because it might be having already some previous experience of handling such an activity through a IPO. Finally, we have third route of floating new capital issues, and that's the rights issue or selling of rights to the existing shareholders. Right? This method entails issue of fresh securities to the existing shareholders on pro rata basis. Now, what does pro rata basis mean? Okay, let's try to understand that. The pro rata basis means that everyone gets its fair share. For example, when a company distributes dividends, it pays its shareholders their share in the distributable profits, that's dividends, as per the shares held by them. Now, suppose if someone has 10% stake in the overall shareholding, such a shareholder will have 10% share in the dividends as well. By analogy, same logic applies to rights issue as well. So that's what pro rata basis would mean. Now let's look at some of the features of the rights issue. The rights are generally issued under preemptive right that existing shareholders enjoy in a company. By virtue of this preemptive right, any fresh issue of shares has to be first offered to existing shareholders before it could be offered to others. Rights issue are priced by issuers following fixed price mechanism. Okay, the issuers generally set price lesser than the market price of the share. Now, when rights are offered to the investors have a choice to subscribe to the offer or else renounce or surrender it or simply let it expire. That's just like we do when we get a right in any manner. Just think of right of vote that you might be having. In case of a vote, you have a choice. Either you can go and cast out your vote, either you can, stay away and then, prefer not to participate in any sort of electioneering, right? So same is the case when rights issues are offered to the shareholders in a company, right? If an investor surrenders or does not subscribe to a rights offer, that might be offered to him, right, by the company. Then in that case, the rights can be offered by the company to other investors who may be new investors to the issuing company. Okay, so these were some of the features that the rights issue can have. Now we talk about the public offer. We know that a public offer involves sale of capital by the company to the general public. Under this method of raising capital, if proper checks and balances or regulation is not in place, then there is always a possibility that unscrupulous or crooked promoters can enter market to cheat or rob gullible or less informed investors. Therefore, in order to ensure that only good companies are allowed to enter primary market for raising capital, there are certain barriers put in place by the regulators on the entry of companies to the public issue market. Okay, so it may not be possible for every company to make public offering. Large companies may make it easily, but what about small companies? These companies have other options for raising capital from the primary market, right? We will be examining those options which are available to such companies which cannot make their entry to the public issue market. Those options will be examining later on. Okay, now let us see what are the regulatory norms. What are those regulatory norms for entry to the IPO segment? In all, there are three routes. Let's examine them one by one. Okay, only those companies that satisfy four regulatory conditions are allowed to enter IPO market through route one. Okay, so we are discussing route number one. So what are these four conditions? Let's explore them one by one. Number one, the company desirous of making IPO should have net tangible assets of at least 3 crores for 3 full years, of which not more than 50% is held in monetary assets. That's the condition number first. Condition number second is that the company should have a track record of distributable profits in at least 3 out of preceding 5 years. Condition number three is the issuing company should have net worth of at least 1 crore in 3 years. Finally, number four condition is that the proposed issue size should not exceed 5 times the pre-issue net worth of the issuing company. Okay, so only such companies that are able to satisfy these four conditions set by the regulator will be allowed to enter or tap the IPO market through route number one. Okay, or in other words, we can say if a company wants to enter the IPO market, then if that company is good in all these parameters, then it will be allowed simply to enter the IPO market to raise the capital. Now we will see route number two. Okay, if an IPO intended company cannot qualify for route number one, then it may try to enter IPO through route number two. And what are the conditions for route two? They are a little bit easier, or little bit simpler than the route number one. But let's check them as well. Okay, the issuing company has to be willing to offer its proposed issue through book building route, and at least 50% allotment should mandatorily be reserved for qualified institutional buyers or QIBs. Now you may ask, who are these QIBs? Okay, I would like to tell you that the market regulator SEBI defines qualified institutional buyers or QIBs as those institutional investors who are generally perceived to possess expertise and the financial muscle to evaluate and invest in the capital markets. Okay, they are generally big players. Okay, the QIBs are generally banks, trust funds, pension funds, etc. The second condition for route number two is that post-issue face value of capital should be 10 crore rupees. Now you will ask, what is face value? Right? The face value, unlike book value, there are many terms which are used in context of value of a share. Now we talk about face value. The face value, unlike book value or market value, is written on the face of a share certificate. Like you have, face value written on a currency note. It's a different thing that what would be the intrinsic value or fair value of that currency note ultimately. Similarly, on each share certificate, you'll find a face value. Then there are other concepts or other terms like what is the intrinsic value, economic value of the share, and what's the market value, and all these values could differ from each other because of certain reasons, right? So we talk about face value. Face value, unlike book value or market value, is written on the face of a share certificate. Now this is the basic value of the share. You would have seen in case of IPOs, companies add premium to the face value of a share to arrive at the offer price. Then we have route 3, which is less stringent than the previous two routes. Under this route, the condition to be fulfilled is that the proposed project for which a company is looking for funds has been appraised or participated to the extent of 15% by some financial institution or scheduled commercial bank, of which at least 10% comes from the appraiser. The second condition is same as route 2. That's minimum post-issue face value of capital of issuing company should be 10 crore rupees, right? Now we have some entities or businesses that are exempted from entry norms. There are certain businesses that need not to satisfy any entry norms if they wish to approach primary market for making their public issues for the sake of raising capital. Okay. In other words, they have a free entry. These entities that don't have to follow any entry norms. These entities have a free entry to the public issue market without any barrier, right? Now, what are those entities or businesses? The first category of such exempted entities includes private and public sector banks. Then there are infrastructure companies that follow certain requirements. They are also exempted from fulfilling any entry norms to the IPO market. The rights issue also doesn't need any qualifying of entry norms by the rights offering company. So these are some of the exceptions to the entry to the primary market in case of public offers. Now these are some of the main problems that are faced by the parties to a public offer. For example, because of information asymmetry, already, between the investors and the issuing companies, there are always problems such as moral hazard, adverse selection to be faced by the investors in the issue market. We also saw that stringent barriers set by market regulators to the IPO market. Okay. Finally, public offers of all kinds are often not liked by the companies because they entail them to face heavy issuing costs. Now we have private placement that overcomes many of the problems associated with the public offer. The private placement is a sale of shares to the pre-selected investors and institutions rather than in the open market, right? It's an alternative to the initial public offerings or IPOs for a company seeking to raise capital for expansion. Investors that are invited to participate in a private placement program include wealthy individual investors, banks, and other financial institutions, mutual funds, insurance companies, and pension funds. In simple, private placement helps the company to avoid going through the IPO route to raise money from the primary market. The private placement mode is of course less time consuming and low in costs compared to the IPO. Since private placement involves a few investors, the issuing company can tailor make or design its capital issue deal to make it specific to the mutual needs and requirements of issuing company and the interested investors. Moreover, private placement requires issuing companies to make fewer disclosures, compliance, and there is no rating requirements, as is involved in case of the IPOs. This is an illustrative list of prospective investors in a private placement. The investors include financial institutions, corporate entities, banks, high net worth individuals, provident funds, and mutual funds. As a whole, you can figure out that these players are mostly large institutions who generally sit on huge corpus of funds and often look for long-term investment opportunities in the market. Hence, these parties would represent ideally, hence these parties would represent ideal kind of investors under a private placement scheme or mode. Now, these are the three modes of making a private placement. Private placement can also be made in three ways, right? Now, what are these three ways? These are private placement by an unlisted company, preferential allotment, and qualified institutional placement by a listed company. Let's see them one by one. First of all, preferential placement. Now, what's preferential placement? The preferential placement is the mode of issuing shares or convertible securities on preferential basis through private placement by a listed company. So literally, preferential placement is the process of issuing shares to selected people based on the criteria set by the issuing company. Apart from equity shares, various other securities can be offered under preferential placement. Now, these would include partly convertible debentures, fully convertible debentures, and share warrants. So these are the types of securities that a company can offer if it's interested in raising capital through private or preferential allotment. SEBI has advised certain rules that pertain to preferential placements. By virtue of such regulatory rules, preferential allotments should follow a lock-in period, that securities that are sold under preferential placement cannot be resold to subsequent investors immediately, but they can be sold only after expiry of a specified lock-in period, right? Another condition set for preferential placement is that issuing company should disclose details about utilization of the funds raised under preferential allotment in its balance sheet. Okay, it does not need to have stringent or tough disclosure requirements as it is the case with IPOs, but some amount of disclosure is there. Okay. Moreover, preferential allotment should be priced not less than higher of average of the weekly high and low of the closing prices quoted on a stock exchange during the last 6 months preceding the date of general meeting, or the average of the weekly high and low of such closing prices during the 2 weeks preceding the date of general meeting. So this is the mechanism, this is the method which has to be followed for pricing of issues under the preferential allotment. Now we examine various reasons as to why would companies like to opt for preferential allotment method or private placement for raising capital from the primary market, right? Now what are these? The companies feel there are many advantages when this route is selected for raising fresh or new capital, right? For example, preferential placements or preferential allotments, that's what they are known as, right? Would help companies to enhance promoters' holding as they pursue debt restructuring or conversion of loans into equity. This route also facilitates capital flows when companies want to tap foreign investment from some strategic investors. It can also facilitate issue of stock options to the employees and takeover of company by the management group, right? So you can see how many privileges it can give, or how many, for how many ways, for how many benefits this particular method of raising capital can be used by the companies, right? So these are some of the drivers that would motivate companies to take preferential allotment under private placement mode for raising capital against other available options. The second method of private placement is called qualified institutional placement, or QIP. Now, what is this all about? What is QIP all about? On the screen, you can see that qualified institutional placement, or QIP, has been defined as a mode of issuing equity shares or convertible securities to qualified institutional buyers, or QIBs. That's both foreign as well as domestic investors through private placement without any lock-in period and listing requirement. So this route doesn't require any lock-in period or listing arrangement for the issuing companies. That such a route would be advantageous to both issuing companies as well as the potential investors, because it would have less hassles and cost consequences for both of them. As already said, qualified institutional buyers, or QIBs, are those institutional investors who are generally perceived to possess expertise and financial muscle to evaluate and invest in the capital markets. This is the list of entities that are recognized as qualified institutional buyers by the SEBI. The full form of SEBI is Securities and Exchange Board of India, and SEBI is the market regulator in case of capital markets, right? I just wanted to remind that. In other words, these entities fall, now these entities which you can see on the screen, I'm talking about them. These entities fall in the definition of qualified institutional buyers as given by the SEBI, right? If we look on the screen, these entities include public financial institutions, scheduled commercial banks, mutual funds, SEBI registered foreign institutional investors, domestic and foreign venture capitalists, multilateral and bilateral development finance institutions, state industrial development corporations or SIDCOs, and certain insurance companies, provident funds, and pension funds. Therefore, these are the buyers with which a company can enter into private placement and qualified institutional placement route, right? Finally, we look at various advantages that qualified institutional placement offers to its stakeholders, right? For example, qualified institutional placement route of private placement has a simple procedure and is less time consuming against other options, those options which we have discussed previously. Okay. Further, there is no lock-in period or listing requirement for the parties. The transaction costs are lesser compared to GDR or ADR. Above all this, there is no continuous requirement of disclosure condition set by the market regulator, as is the case with public offers. So that's all we have today on understanding of types of new issues in the primary market and the legal framework involved in case of their implementation.